Hello, class, and welcome to Chapter 9. These next couple chapters are kind of short, so these are little mini lectures, and I'll provide other resources for you to kind of help you with this material as well. So I'd encourage you to read your textbook, watch my lecture videos, and then kind of work through the quizzes as you would maybe taking notes on the chapter to make sure you understand everything. But Chapter 9 is on the urban environment. So we've talked a lot about environmental biology, but what about the urban environment? This is one of my favorite chapters. This is so interesting to me, especially living in Southern California, the cities that we live in. This is just fascinating. So I hope you guys enjoy this chapter. Las Vegas, Nevada is a site of a natural spring, and it receives about 4 inches of precipitation annually. The Hoover Dam provides water and has allowed Las Vegas to grow, but it competes with other Western states for water. And there's lots of impervious surfaces and energy demand. What are the effects from climate change? So let's talk about population and urbanization. A milestone: as of 2008, half of the world's population lived in an urban area, in a city. So most of the world's population, now probably more than half, live in a city. Urbanization, what does that mean? It's the process in which people increasingly move from rural areas to densely populated cities. Jobs define urban versus rural, not populations, and rural areas occupations usually involve harvesting natural resources, whereas urban area occupations and jobs usually involve jobs that are not connected with natural resources. So people are moving to cities due to decrease in employment opportunities in rural areas. The basic characteristics of city populations, they're very diverse due to race, ethnicity, religion, and socioeconomic status. There's a younger population in cities than in rural area, usually an influx into the cities. There's more males in cities in developing nations and more females in cities in developed nations. Urbanization is increasing rapidly, especially in developing countries. About 9 out of the 10 largest cities are in developing countries. And a megacity is what we call a city greater than 10 million habitats. So here we have the world's 10 largest cities looking at 1975, 2011, and 2025. Tokyo, Japan is way up there. India, Mexico City, Shanghai, Mumbai, Mexico City, New York, Beijing, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Brazil. Urban agglomeration. This is when an urbanized core region is consisting of several adjacent cities or megacities and their surrounding developed suburbs. And Los Angeles is a huge example of that, where it's an urbanized core region. It's including not only the city of Los Angeles, but kind of the sprawl. We have San Francisco, New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Miami is a big one, many cities in Texas, Dallas, Houston, and so forth, Chicago. Substandard housing and homeless. So, cities are typically occupied by squatters, where a third of the urban population in developing countries don't really have a place to live. And there's no city services to these people. Water, sewage, garbage collection, police, and fire protection is very limited to these areas. So you kind of start to form very poor sections of the city as well. So, city as an ecosystem. An urban ecosystem is a heterogeneous, dynamic urban area studied in the context of a broader ecological system. And urban ecology is studied based on 4 variables: the population, the organization, the environment, and technology. So here we have cities as an ecosystem. Fascinating, right? Let's look at Phoenix, Arizona. Along with Baltimore, it comprises an urban long-term ecological research site, which studies and measures human environmental interactions. So the effect of cities on animals, on the hydrologic water cycle, on heat, as well as many others. Cities are a dynamic open system. That means that natural capital, all the inputs going into the city, will produce outputs and waste. So we have energy, fuel, clean water, clean air, food, raw and refined materials for construction, industry, business, and consumer products are all funneled into a city. And what comes out of the city? Waste heat, greenhouse gas, wastewater, water pollution, air pollution, solid waste, goods, some goods and services. But how can we manage this dynamic system of the urban ecosystem? So as you can imagine, we have a lot of environmental problems in urban areas. We have fragment wildfire, that cities encroach on wetlands, forests, deserts, the impermeable surfaces and urban runoff discharged into waterways. So impermeable surfaces means, things can leak through because there's so much space for the water to go and so much waste. So we have motor oil, lawn fertilizers, heavy metals. We have noise pollution. Brownfields are urban areas of abandoned industrial or residential sites that may be contaminated from past use. And there was a reclamation of brownfields in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was successful, turning this abandoned industrial area in the 1980s actually into a subdivision, a neighborhood. More problems in urban areas. You have incredibly long commutes. I don't have to tell you guys that, living in Southern California. There's a buildup of emissions due to cars and industry. There's an urban heat island where it's actually hotter inside the city than outside the city. It affects local air currents, weather conditions, and it contributes to the buildup of pollutants or dust domes. So here we have the downtown area, the average temperature versus rural as it spreads out. You can see temperature decreases and varies on a summer afternoon depending on where you are. We have a dust dome around cities, and then wind speeds can increase and then moving the pollutants downward. Again, I think a lot of this affects Los Angeles, and this is why I love talking about this chapter, because many of us are living in the dust dome. And then when the wind comes, they say don't go outside because the air quality is awful. What are some benefits of urbanization? There's not all negatives. A well-planned city can benefit the environment. If it's well-planned, it can be, designed in a way to reduce pollution, preserve rural areas. Compact development is the design of cities in which tall, multi-unit residential buildings are close to shopping and jobs and are all connected via public transportation. Public transportation is huge in helping with long commutes and pollution. Urban land use planning. This is the process of deciding the best use of undeveloped land in a given area, and it's based on economic concerns and influenced by political and economic factors, and always regulated through zoning. There's commercial, residential, industrial zoning rules, and property owners must also meet zoning ordinances. Gentrification is the movement of wealthier people back to older, rundown homes that have been renovated, and it often displaces the urban poor who cannot afford it. Land use planning is the process of deciding the best uses for land in a given area, and this results in zoning. David Harvey in the 1970s helped to zone Baltimore and Maryland. Transportation and urban development. So transportation availability will affect the city's spatial structure. An example of this is an East Coast city looking, from the 17 to 1850s, moving to the 20th century. You see residential areas, railroad, trolleys, interstates, and just how, railroads, trolleys, and interstates will help with the spreading of that urban development. Rapid transit systems can efficiently handle large numbers of people, and many cities are facing investment choices for transportation. The suburban sprawl is the patchwork of vacant and developed tracts around the edges of cities. Finding a transportation strategy that mixes and at least 11 states are currently using these management laws. Making cities more sustainable. Characteristics of a sustainable city are clear, cohesive urban growth policies, and efficient use of energy, other resources, reducing pollution and waste, having large areas of green space, designed to be people centers, not car centers, and then food grown in the city, for example, in rooftop gardens and compact development. There's a rise of urban gardening, use of rooftops for urban growth in gardens, increasing food security, relationship with land and food, and many restaurants, businesses, and groups are looking to creatively produce their own food as well. There's a rise of architecture that's sustainable and even positive for the surrounding environment. Recycling wastewater, efficient lighting, and sustainable building materials all help with this urban growth. Barcelona, Spain is an example of a people-centered city, not a car-centered city, where the centers are filled with people and there's lots of public transportation. Sustainable cities, case in point, another example is in Brazil, Curitiba, where you have express routes, indirect routes, direct bus routes, and worker routes all around the city center. And that's the end of this. I will see you for next chapter 10. Thanks for listening.